Title: The street dancer who pulled me out of the crowd changed everything. She grabbed my hand before I could say no. The crowd on Fifth Avenue went silent for one heartbeat. I had never danced in public in my life. Her eyes told me a secret before her mouth did. 3 months later, I would lie to my own father. One video would nearly destroy everything we built. But that night, I only knew I couldn't let go of her hand. My name is Nora Callahan, 31. An architect who spent her whole life following rules. This is the story of the woman who taught me that some rules deserve to be broken. It started on a Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago. The kind of ordinary night nobody remembers. Except me. I was walking home from the office, coffee gone cold in my hand, when the music stopped me. A small crowd had gathered near the fountain. Phones raised. Watching a woman move like the pavement belonged to her. She wore a faded denim jacket and sneakers scuffed white at the toes, hair pulled back in a loose knot. Her name, I would later learn, was Reese Alvarado, 29. A dancer who buskied for rent money between auditions. I only meant to watch for a minute before catching my train, but her eyes found mine in the crowd. She smiled the way you smile at someone you already know, though we had never met before that moment. Then she reached through the strangers, took my hand, and pulled me into the open circle without asking permission. My whole body froze. Heart pounding. Certain everyone was staring at the woman in the gray suit who didn't belong there. Just move with me, she said quietly. Nobody's watching you. They're watching us. I don't remember deciding to dance. I just remember her hand steady on my waist, guiding. Patient. Unhurried. When the song ended, the crowd clapped, and Reese laughed like she had known all along I would say yes. You're stiff as a board, she teased, but you've got rhythm hiding somewhere in there. I laughed for the first time in weeks, surprised by how easily it came out of me. She asked for my number before I even gave her my name, and somehow that felt right. I told myself it was nothing, just a strange, funny story to tell my coworkers on Monday, but I found myself checking my phone all weekend, hoping she would text first. Growing up, I was the good daughter of Pastor Michael Callahan, the girl who never missed church, never raised her voice. My father built his whole identity around order, discipline, and a very narrow idea of what a life should look like. I had dated men before, gone through the motions, always feeling like I was performing a role written for someone else. Reese texted me 2 days later. Coffee? I promise I won't make you dance this time. We met at a small shop near Wicker Park, and she talked with her hands the way dancers often do. She told me she'd been dancing on the streets since she dropped out of a conservatory scholarship at 22. My family thought I was throwing my life away, she said. Turns out I was just choosing my own. I admired how easily she said things I had never once said out loud about myself. By our third coffee, I realized I was memorizing the shape of her laugh instead of listening to my own thoughts. She never asked if I was interested in her. She simply existed near me, warm and unbothered, and let me decide. One night she taught me a slow two-step in her tiny apartment, records stacked against the wall like books. You're allowed to feel this, she whispered. Close enough that I forgot to breathe for a moment. I kissed her first. It surprised us both, and neither of us pulled away. For the first time in my adult life, something felt more true than terrifying. We started spending every free evening together, and I began inventing excuses for my family about where I'd been. Reese noticed the excuses but never pushed, though I could see the question sitting quietly behind her eyes. I'm not ashamed of you, I told her one night, and she said, I never thought you were. Nora. Though I hadn't told a single person, not my best friend, not my mother, no one at the firm. Reese had come out to her family at 19, and though it was hard, they had eventually come around. It gets easier, she said, once you stop carrying 2 different versions of yourself. I wanted to believe her, but my father's voice lived louder in my head than my own. We took a weekend trip to Michigan. Just the two of us. Away from the city and its watching eyes. On the beach at sunset. She braided a strand of my hair and said, "I could get used to this." I said it back before I could stop myself. "Me too. I could get used to you." For a few weeks, life felt almost simple. Like we existed in a small, private world nobody else could enter. Reese started teaching a free dance class on weekends for teenagers in her old neighborhood. And I began helping her. Watching her with those kids. Patient and fierce and full of joy. I fell for her all over again. But my mother called that same week to say my father wanted me at Sunday dinner. No excuses this time. I sat across from him. My stomach in knots. Watching him talk about the church's plans for expansion. He mentioned, almost casually, that Danny Whitfield, a deacon's son, had asked about me again. He's a good man, Nora. Steady. The kind of man who builds a life you can be proud of. I said nothing. Just nodded, hating myself for the silence more than I hated his words. That night I told Reese what happened, and she listened without judgment, though I saw the hurt flicker across her face. "You don't owe him your whole life," she said gently. "But you do owe yourself the truth eventually." I promised her I would tell my parents when I was ready, and she said she would wait. But not forever. Weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Joy with Reese by night. Careful silence with my family by day. My best friend, Priya, noticed the change in me first. The way I smiled at my phone too often. "Who is he?" she asked one lunch. And I almost told her the truth. Almost. Instead I said, "It's complicated," and Priya, sharp as ever, said, "It usually is with you." Reese and I went to a friend's rooftop party, and for one careless evening, we forgot to be careful. Someone filmed us dancing close together, laughing, foreheads touching, and posted it online without asking either of us. By morning, the video had thousands of views, tagged with my full name from a mutual friend's comment. My phone buzzed nonstop, and among the messages was one from my mother. "Nora, is this you?" I felt the ground tilt beneath me, the careful life I had built cracking open in a single night. Reese called immediately, panicked, apologizing as if the video were somehow her fault, not the stranger who filmed it. "This isn't on you," I told her, though my voice shook with fear I couldn't quite hide. My father called an hour later, and his voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow," was all he said before hanging up. I barely slept that night, rehearsing explanations I knew wouldn't matter once I said them out loud. Reese offered to come with me, but I told her this was something I had to face alone. I arrived at my parents' house to find my mother's eyes red, my father standing rigid by the window. "Is it true?" he asked, not turning around. "Are you gay, Nora?" I opened my mouth to soften it, to explain. But the truth came out plain instead. "Yes." The silence that followed felt longer than every Sunday sermon I had ever sat through in my life. "I raised you better than this," he said finally. And the words landed like a slap I couldn't return. My mother reached for my hand, but he stopped her with a look sharper than any words. "You will not bring that woman into this house," he said, "and you will not bring shame onto mine." I left without arguing, because I had no fight left in me that day. Only grief. I drove straight to Reese's apartment and cried in her arms until I had no tears left to give. "I'm sorry," I kept saying, though I wasn't even sure what I was apologizing for anymore. "You have nothing to be sorry for," she said, holding me tighter. "He's the one who's wrong here." For days I moved through work like a ghost, answering emails I didn't remember writing, smiling at nothing. Priya finally cornered me in the break room and said, "I saw the video. Nora, why didn't you tell me?" I braced myself for judgment, but instead she hugged me and said, "I just wish you trusted me sooner." Her acceptance cracked something open in me. A small hope that maybe not everyone would turn away. Still, my father's silence stretched on. No calls. No messages. Just an absence shaped exactly like him. My mother started calling secretly. Always in a hushed voice. Always ending with, "Please don't tell your father." "I don't understand it," she admitted once. "But you're still my daughter. And that hasn't changed for me." It wasn't everything. But it was something. And I clung to it more than I wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Reese was preparing for an audition that could change her career. A spot with a touring dance company. "It's based in Los Angeles," she told me carefully. Watching my reaction more than her own words, my stomach dropped. Though I tried to smile and tell her how proud I was of her. "It's just an audition," she said. "Nothing's decided yet." But we both heard the future shifting quietly between us. That week, work piled higher than ever. A major promotion on the line. My name finally on a project. My boss called me in and said the partners were impressed. That this could be the year I made partner. I should have felt triumphant. But all I could think about was the empty chair at my father's table. Reese and I started arguing more. Small things at first. Then not so small. Fear disguised as irritation. "You've been distant," she said one night. "Like you're already preparing to lose me." "Maybe I am," I admitted, hating how true it sounded once it left my mouth. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "I can't be your secret and you're maybe at the same time." We didn't speak for 3 days after that. The longest silence we had ever let sit between us. On the 4th day, she showed up at my office with 2 coffees and a nervous smile. "I got the audition slot," she said. But I told them I needed a week to think about the move. I realized then how much I had been asking her to shrink herself to fit into my careful life. "You should go," I said, surprising us both. "You shouldn't have to choose between your dream and hiding from me." "That's not what I want to hear," she said quietly. "I want to know if you'll fight for us." I didn't have an answer yet. And the honesty of that scared me more than any lie could have. That weekend, Priya invited me over, poured 2 glasses of wine, and said, "Talk." All of it. I told her everything. The years of silence. My father's coldness. My fear of losing everyone I loved at once. "You've spent your whole life being who everyone else needed," she said. "When do you get to just be Nora?" Her words sat with me long after I left, echoing through every empty room of my apartment that night. I called my mother the next morning and asked if she would meet me somewhere my father wouldn't know about. We sat in a diner booth, and she held my hand across the table, tears gathering in her eyes. "Your father grew up believing love only comes in one shape," she said. "I'm still learning it doesn't." "Do you believe that too?" asked, terrified of whatever answer might come next from her. "I believe my daughter deserves to be happy," she said, "even if I'm still figuring out what that means." It wasn't the full acceptance I had hoped for, but it was more honesty than we'd shared in years. I asked her about Danny Whitfield, about the pressure, about why my father clung so tightly to that plan. She hesitated, then said, "There's something about your father's past you don't know, Nora. Something he's never told you." My heart pounded as she explained that my father had a brother, my Uncle Robert, who died young. "Robert was gay," she said softly, "and your grandfather never spoke to him again before he passed. Your father has carried that guilt his whole life. I think he's terrified of losing you the same way." The revelation didn't excuse his cruelty, but it cracked open a door I hadn't known existed between us. I left the diner shaken, understanding for the first time that his coldness was built on old, unhealed grief. That night I told Reese everything, and she was quiet for a long time before speaking. "That doesn't make it okay," she said, "but it explains a lot. Fear makes people cruel sometimes." "I still don't know how to fix this," I admitted. "I don't even know where to start." "You start," she said, "by deciding what kind of life you actually want to live. Out loud. 2 days later, Reese told me she had accepted the Los Angeles opportunity, starting in 6 weeks. "I'm not asking you to follow me," she said, "but I am asking you to decide if you want to try." I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling, weighing the promotion, my father, my whole careful life against her. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office and asked what remote or transfer options existed for architects. To my surprise, the firm had a satellite office in Los Angeles that needed senior staff within the year. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a door, and for once I decided to walk through it myself. I told Reese about the possibility, and her whole face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. "You'd really consider that?" she asked, and I said, "I'm done building a life around everyone else's comfort." We started planning quietly, cautiously. Not certain yet if it would actually happen, only certain we wanted to try. My father, meanwhile, remained distant, though my mother mentioned he had started attending a grief support group at church. "He's not the same man," she said, "but he's trying. Give him time. Even if it's hard." I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. But I let the smallest thread of hope stay alive. Priya threw me a small goodbye dinner when my transfer was approved, laughing that she'd visit constantly for the weather. Reese's dance company announced a public showcase before their tour began. Open to the whole city. Free admission. "It's my last performance here," she said. "Will you come? Really come?" Not hiding in the back. I told her yes without hesitation, surprising myself with how easily the answer arrived this time. The morning of the showcase, my mother called and asked, carefully, if she could attend as well. "I want to see this part of your life," she said. "The part I've been too afraid to ask about." I agreed, my hands shaking as I hung up the phone, unsure what her presence there would mean. The plaza where it was held was the same one where Reese had first pulled me into the crowd. I stood near the edge, watching her warm up, remembering the stranger who had changed my entire life that day. My mother arrived alone, scanning the crowd nervously until she found me and squeezed my hand tightly. The music started, and Reese moved across the makeshift stage like the whole world existed just to watch her. Partway through the performance, she scanned the crowd and found my eyes, and something in her stance softened. She extended her hand toward the audience, an open invitation, the same gesture that started everything between us. Without thinking, I stepped forward, ignoring the crowd, ignoring the fear, and let her pull me in again. We danced together in front of hundreds of strangers, my mother watching from the front row, tears on her face. When the song ended, the crowd erupted into applause, and Reese kissed my forehead in front of everyone. I turned to find my mother clapping too, wiping her eyes, nodding at me like she finally understood. Then, near the back of the crowd, I saw a familiar figure standing stiffly beside a lamppost. My father had come, though he hadn't told anyone, watching from a distance like he wasn't sure he was allowed closer. My heart raced as I walked toward him, unsure whether to expect anger or something else entirely. "I didn't know if I should come," he said quietly. "Your mother told me about tonight." "I'm glad you did," I said, though my voice trembled with years of unspoken hurt between us. "I watched you dance," he said. "You looked happier than I've seen you in a long time." "I am happy, Dad. I'm sorry it took hurting you to get here. But I'm not sorry for who I am." He was quiet for a long moment, jaw tight, eyes wet in a way I had never seen before. "Your Uncle Robert used to dance too," he said finally. "I never let myself remember that until now." "I was wrong to push you away," he admitted. "I was scared of losing you the way I lost him." "I'm still here," I said softly. "I never stopped being your daughter, even when you couldn't see me." He nodded, unable to speak further, and reached out to hug me for the first time in months. Reese approached slowly, uncertain, And my father looked at her for a long, searching moment. "You're the one who makes my daughter dance in front of strangers," he said, almost managing a smile. "Only the good kind of terrifying," Reese said carefully. And to my shock, he actually laughed. It wasn't full forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Fragile and real and entirely unexpected. Over the following weeks, my father started calling more often. Awkward at first, then gradually more comfortable. He never became someone who marched in parades or posted rainbow flags, but he tried. In his own quiet way. My mother told me later that he had finally visited Robert's grave for the first time in decades. He said he owed him an apology, she said. And he owed you one too. He's trying. Nora. Trying was more than I ever expected from him. And I decided that was enough to build on. 6 weeks later, I packed my apartment into boxes, the same careful architect's hands now trembling with excitement, not fear. Priya cried at the airport, promising to visit twice a year at minimum, dragging Danny Whitfield's memory into a joke. My mother hugged me longer than usual, whispering, "Call me when you land." Every time. I mean it. Even my father showed up, stiff and formal, but present. And he shook Reese's hand without hesitation this time. "Take care of my daughter," he told her. And Reese said, "She takes pretty good care of herself, sir." He almost smiled again. And for the first time, it didn't feel forced or fragile between us. The flight to Los Angeles felt lighter than any flight I had ever taken in my life before. Reese held my hand the entire way, occasionally squeezing it like she couldn't quite believe I was really there. "No more hiding," she said somewhere over the desert. "No more maybe. Just us." Out loud. "From here on. Just us," I agreed, resting my head against her shoulder as the city lights spread out below. We found a small apartment near her new studio. Walls bare. Boxes stacked. But it already felt like home. On our first night there, she pulled me by the hand onto the tiny balcony overlooking the street. Music drifted up from a bar below, and she smiled that same knowing smile from the day we met. "Dance with me," she said. "No crowd this time. Just you and me and every mistake we survived." I laughed, pulling her close, finally understanding that home was never a place. It was always this feeling. My father still calls most Sundays now. Awkward but steady. Always ending with, "Tell Reese I said hello." My mother visits twice a year. And each time she watches Reese teach a class with quiet, growing pride. The video that once threatened to ruin my life sits forgotten online now. Just a stranger's clip among millions. What remains is real. A life I chose. In daylight. Without apology. Standing beside the woman who pulled me into it. I used to think courage meant never being afraid. But Reese taught me it means dancing anyway. Some love stories start with fireworks. But mine started with a stranger's hand reaching through a crowd. And never letting go. Then